What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Deborah Diamond. Now, Deborah's new book, Life After Near Death, documents miraculous stories of healing and transformation in the extraordinary lives of people with newfound powers and describes in detail a dozen cases of remarkable, science-based cognitive and psychological near-death after effects. Deborah Diamond, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming on today. I love these subjects, the near-death experience, and this is kind of a cool book, actually, Life After Near Death. Now, just before we get into a bit of background on yourself, why have you written this book?
Okay, well, that's a good question, Kevin, and it requires me probably to tell you a little bit about myself so you know how I arrived at investigating and researching the near-death experience after effects. So I'll just drop back for a second and tell you a little bit about my background. As you know from reading the book, I am a former investment professional. I was in the investment business for many years as a money manager. As a matter of fact, my clients were primarily in the UK and Switzerland. So that's where, I used to go to visit my clients who were primarily institutions in the UK. And that was what I did professionally. I was a money manager on Wall Street. I was also a commentator on CNBC. And when I was in the investment business, I always knew things. I knew things like I would know about companies and industries and products and managements before I ever read anything about them. So there would be prospectuses and annual reports dropped on my desk, and without even picking them up, I would just kind of know about these companies. And I never really understood how it was that I knew anything about these companies because I hadn't really done much work or any work on them. But I just kind of figured, well, I didn't think about it too much. Now, my boss used to say to me, Deborah, you have really good instincts. And I thought, yeah, I guess I just have good instincts. I didn't know how else to explain it. And of course, in the investment business, nobody talks about the word psychic never comes into the vocabulary. It's just not part of the investment business. So I was in the business for many years. I knew these things. And it wasn't until 2008 that I decided I would take an intuition development class in New York because I thought it Saturday and Sunday. And Saturday morning, we did some exercises. They were very low-key exercises, and I was getting everything. And I couldn't figure out how that was possible, but I didn't think too much about it because, as I said, these were very low-key exercises. And then we took a break. And when we came back from the break, the teacher said, now we're going to do a seance. And this really was not why I came to the class. I was interested in developing my intuition. I did not want to do a seance. It was kind of scary to me. But I figured, well, it was still Saturday morning. The class went on through Sunday afternoon, and nothing was going to happen anyway, so I just do this, and then we go on to the next exercise. So the teacher said, I'll put you in a meditative state, and if you see anybody, see anything, you let me know, and I'll tell you what to do. So I thought, well, that's fine. That doesn't pertain to me because I'm not going to see anybody. So we meditated. She took us out of the meditation. And then she said, does anyone see anything? And I looked around the room and everyone was looking at each other. And I raised my hand. And she said, yes, Deborah, what do you see? And I said, well, I see about 50 people. So I was seeing people who went with me, who were family members of mine who had passed. I was seeing people who had passed who went with other people in the room, none of whom I knew, and then I was seeing random people. So the teacher said, well, if you see someone, for instance, in the corner of the room, that means they probably go with someone sitting in that corner. So I said, well, I do see someone in the corner of the room, and I described him. He was Hispanic with dark hair parted in the middle, big handlebar mustache, big white teeth. And as I described him, a woman sitting in that corner began to sob. And she said, I can identify him. So she said, that was my fiance. He died 2 years ago. And she asked me if during the break, if she showed me some pictures on her cell phone, if I could identify him from the picture. And I said yes, because he was very clear to me. I've since found out that only 2% of mediums, I'm a psychic and a medium, and only 2% of them actually see them, get the image of the person. So I do get that. So she showed me during the break, showed me pictures on her cell phone. She flipped through the pictures and I said, there, that's him. And she said, yes, that's my fiance. And he did die 2 years ago. And she was very grateful to me for making this connection for her. And she thanked me and she gave me a big hug. Now, I used to work on Wall Street, and there aren't a lot of thank yous on Wall Street, and there are no hugs either. So it wasn't lost on me that I had done something significant for somebody and something meaningful. So I thought about that. Now, I spent the rest of the weekend in that class, and then Sunday night I drove back to Baltimore. And when I drove back, I called one of my sons. I have 3 sons, but this one scores well in logic tests. So I called him and I explained what happened in this class. And he didn't say anything as I explained it. But when I was all done, he said, well, that makes sense. We're just energy and the energy has to go somewhere. So that gave me a context for understanding what happened, sort of a pseudoscientific context. I still didn't tell anybody what happened because it's not the kind of thing you talk about. And that summer, I decided to go out to Taos, New Mexico. I don't know, Kevin, if you've ever been to Taos, but it's a very spiritual place. A lot of psychics and artists and writers out there. And I had been out there a number of times in the past, and I thought I would go out there to paint for a couple months. But what happened was I rented a place for 2 months, and what happened after 2 months was I was still there. And that's a very common theme in Taos. If you talk to the locals and say, how long have you been here? They say, oh, I came for a weekend about 20 years ago. So many people end up staying in Taos. And I found that while I was there, I began to unpack these gifts that had been given to me, and I began to work with this energy and develop my abilities as a psychic and a medium. And then what happened was, now how do we get to the near-death experience after effects? So I stayed in Taos, and I continued to do, I did work as a psychic, I did readings, I eventually gave workshops, and I got very used to the fact that, this is what I did. Because in Taos, when people ask, what do you do? And you say, I'm a psychic, they say, oh, me too. It's not like Baltimore where I live or like the UK where you are. So that's what I did. And now eventually I came back to the East Coast in the United States. And I decided, well, I'm back on the East Coast, and my work as a psychic and a medium is probably not going to continue because it's not like Taos. But that's not what happened. When I came back to the East Coast, I was approached by a woman who'd had a near-death experience. She had a cardiac arrest at 39 and died, and then came back, and she asked me if I would do a reading for her. And I said yes. And then after that, she asked if I would do a reading for one of her friends, and then the friend's mother wanted a reading. And eventually, I was practicing as a psychic and a medium here on the East Coast in the United States. Now, how did we get to the near-death experiences? I was asked to do a psychic mediumship reading for a famous near-death experiencer, NDEer, in Washington, D.C. a number of years ago. And this person was struck by lightning and came back with unusual after effects. And when I read for him, I was seeing some very unusual symbols. Psychics see things in symbols, and I was getting unusual symbols. And when I came back to Baltimore that evening, I started thinking about what happened to him and why does he have these unusual abilities and after effects? And what about other NDEers? What do they get? And what are they supposed to do with it? So I decided to Google near-death experience after effects. And what I found out was there hadn't been any research done. So I said, well, I guess I'll have to do the research. Now, it's not that far-fetched because remember I said I used to be in the investment business. I spent the first 10 years in the investment business as a healthcare research analyst. So I used to work on companies and products that were so early stage, they weren't, they were like pre-cutting edge. So I was used to doing original research and working with these kinds of ideas. So that's how this all came about. And I decided actually just to focus on two types of after effects, cognitive and physiologic, because there is a little bit of research about near-death experience after effects, but it focuses mostly on social or psychological after effects. For instance, 65 to 75% of people who have near-death experiences get divorced. Their spouses say to them, honey, if you just stayed the way you were, we were fine. But they can't. They've changed. They've fundamentally changed. So there's a little bit of research into that. There's some research into the electrical sensitivity. However, you don't have to be a near-death experiencer to be electrically sensitive. There are plenty of people who are electrically sensitive who've never had a near-death experience. So, and then there are, of course, people who have these experiences and say, I had a near-death experience and I'm much more spiritual now. Well, I couldn't measure that. There's no way for me to measure how spiritual you were before the experience and how spiritual you are now. So I just couldn't. I couldn't work with those. But for instance, people who have a near-death experience and come back with newfound mathematical abilities or enhanced hearing or enhanced vision that's been medically documented, that I can work with, and it's irrefutable and it's demonstrable and it's been documented medically. So that's what I decided to focus on. And the cognitive after effects are newfound musical and artistic abilities, newfound mathematical abilities. For instance, there's a woman in the book who gets quantum physics downloads, and she has 32 bins of papers in her closet filled with these downloads, and she's actually a former hairdresser, so she has no background in this sort of thing. There are physiologic after effects that include enhanced hearing, and I don't mean like they hear something across the room, they hear down the street. There's a husband and wife couple who both had NDEs, and they both have enhanced hearing, and when they travel, this is how they communicate with each other. So enhanced hearing, enhanced vision. In my book, there's a story of a man whose vision went from 20/90 to 20/10, which is better than perfect vision. There are people with enhanced IQ. In my book, there's a story of a woman whose IQ went from 122 to 145. There are stories of spontaneous healing. So there are many physiologic and cognitive after effects and many, many stories. There are, in fact, in the U.S. alone, there's 15 million people who claim they've had an NDE. And my bet is that there's probably even more than that, because many people have this experience, but they're just not familiar with the term NDE or near-death experience. They don't know what happened to them. All they know is that something happened and they've come back and they're not the same. So, in fact, the way near-death experiences are defined by IANDS, the International Association of Near-Death Experiencers, or ASSIST, which is the Association of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. They say that people who have these experiences, who come back transformed, unable to go back to the way they were previously, that's how you define if you've had this experience, not whether you had some sort of physical trauma. When I was working on the book, many people would say to me, oh, you're working on these cases. How long was this person dead for? And that's not how you define the experience. That's how the media has defined it. That's how television and the movies have defined it. But your consciousness has to be flung out of your body. And it's true that your consciousness is flung out of your body if there's some sort of physical trauma. It can be flung out of your body, like an automobile accident or drowning. But it doesn't always have to be through some sort of physical trauma. So, but the definition is whether you come back transformed, unable to go back to your former way of life. So that's, a long story of how I got to be involved in this. And of course, I did a lot of research. I spoke to a universe of, more than 50 people for the book. The book has about a dozen case studies, more interesting cases. At this point, I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who've had near-death experiences, just so many people. And, and many people who've had unusual after effects. And we found that the book has helped a lot of people, not only people who've had near-death experiences, but people who've had spiritually transformative experiences. And again, people don't talk about these, so they don't know what's happened to them. And then they read the book and they say, okay, now this is starting to make sense. I'm reading about other cases of other people who've had this and that, who come back with these after effects or have difficulty negotiating their life now that they've changed. So this has helped not only NDEers, but others who've had spiritually transformative experiences.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating what you've got to say there. That famous near-death experiencer that you did the reading for, it sounds a bit like Daniel Brinkley. He was struck by
it's not, a lot of people think that's who it is.
I did. That's what it came to my mind, actually, yeah. But okay, yeah. But you did that. Very interesting that in 2008, that's when this sort of psychic ability opened for you. As you were telling the story, I was trying to think, was there a dark night of the soul there? What happened in that room for you just to, trust yourself that you were seeing what you were seeing? Had an event happened weeks prior to that really stripped a lot of ego off, if there was any there? I mean, what happened in that room for that to appear? Had there been any childhood experiences that you now look back and say, oh, well, maybe I was seeing things as a younger kid, but I blocked that out as I got older?
I don't recall seeing things, but I had been psychic. I just didn't know that that's what it was because I wasn't familiar with what that actually meant. In the room when this happened to me, I didn't have any choice in the matter. It was almost like if you walked into a room and there were 50 people there. I mean, they were there. They were in the room, and I opened my eyes and I saw them. I saw them. Just like I see you now. They were plain as day.
Wow.
And they were doing various things, and I didn't have any choice in the matter. They were there, they were in front of me, and they wanted to talk to me. And I just kind of reacted to that. I was, very shook up. I mean, at the moment when it happened, I wasn't so shook up because I was looking at all these people. But the rest of the weekend, I was profoundly unnerved. And I also felt as if I had been run over by a truck, because if you have an experience of this type, a very profound energetic experience, and you're not used to it, it's almost like if you went to the gym for an extreme workout and hadn't worked these muscles before. So that day I kind of dragged myself out of this class. I felt like I could barely walk. I just felt like I had been assaulted by many unusual energies, and I felt it in my physical body. And I also could really figure out what was going on. I didn't get a lot of guidance from anybody in the class. As a matter of fact, in the class, when we took a break, people were coming up to me and saying, "Whoa, you must have been doing this for a long time." And I said, "Well, actually, I've never done this before."
Oh, wow.
I never did it before. So I didn't know, but I had, one of these spontaneous experiences. People have them. I mean, I talk to, when I give talks now, I give a lot of talks. And when I give talks, I often start off by asking the people in the audience, how many of you have had an extraordinary experience for which there's no explanation? And usually about 50% of the people raise their hands. And this is across the board. I'm not, it's not just when I talked at a holistic expo. I spoke to a group of lobbyists and politicians in Washington, and 50% of that audience raised their hand too. This is much more common than we know. It's just nobody talks about it because they don't want their friends to think they're crazy. They don't want to be treated with skepticism. They just don't talk about it. But it's much more common, and in fact, it's becoming more and more common because you probably see this with the work that you do. The veil is thinning, and more people are having these, are having experiences. And I find as a psychic, more and more people are coming to me for readings who ordinarily would not be coming, and they're telling me these stories about, unusual things that have happened to them. So there's clearly something going on. But, that's what happened to me. It does happen to people. It's a spontaneous experience. And it was just waiting for the right moment to happen. And that was, I guess, the right moment as far as spirit was concerned.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's very interesting that... Did anyone else in the family have the gift?
I believe that it runs in my family. I think my dad had it. My dad has passed away, but I think my dad had it. But of course, back then, nobody was going around talking about, being psychic or, anything new age. No. And I don't know if he would have recognized, or maybe he would have recognized what it was. But I mean, I always knew when I was growing up, he used to say he saw me in a dream before I was born. And he would say things like that, which now when I think about that, I'm thinking, there was probably more going on there than we realized. But I think there are a couple people in my family who kind of get messages, and these things do run in families. I know when I read for people who have these experiences or who are psychic, one of my first questions is always like, who else in your family has this? Or sometimes in the readings, I usually know. I see, like their grandmother or their mother had this.
So let me get this
it does
right.
run in families.
Let me get this right. So when you give readings, you say that you see them. How is the information coming to you? Is it are they talking? Is it your voice you're hearing, which you know is your higher self, which is coming from something other part of you, which is coming from them, decoded by your higher self? How is the process working for you when you give a reading then?
So, Kevin, I have all the clairs. So I'm clairvoyant. Clairvoyance, as you know, is clear seeing. I am auditory, so I can hear things. I'm clairsentient. I feel things. I'm claircognizant. I know things. I'm at times clairgustinance. I can taste things, and I can sometimes smell things. Clairolfactory. So when I do a reading, it's like going to the movies. It's like surround sound. I mean, I see things. I hear things. I don't use cards. I don't use runes. I don't use astrology charts. I don't use any tools. I don't need them. I wouldn't even know what to do with them. So I sit down and the information just comes in. So I will see people's, if I'm reading for someone, if I'm doing mediumship and they're people who've passed come in, I see them and they talk to me and I hear them. And sometimes they show me things, or, if they're cooking, they might like show me something they used to bake or cook, and I could smell it and taste it. So I have the whole panoply of clairs, and that's how I get my information. So if I'm asking someone a question about if psychic ability runs in their family, I am usually shown, who the relative is. I'm shown. And I'm told maybe grandmother, and I'm even told like grandmother on the father's side or something like that.
Okay.
So that's how I get my information.
Sure. So do you practice meditation at all?
Not that much.
No, you've just got this gift, haven't you? You've just got this gift, and you're using it.
People always ask
cool.
me, what do I do? I mean, you've probably heard this from other psychics. When people hear that I'm a psychic and a medium, they often come up to me and say, "What do you see when you look at me?" And I always say nothing, because I am not on. And I try to explain to them, I'm just like your doctor or your lawyer or your accountant. If you come to my office and you sit down across the table from me, I'm going to focus in on what your issue is. If you go to the doctor and you've got a bad back, they're going to ask you, what are you here for? And then they're going to use their resources and their knowledge to kind of delve into, what the issue is. And that's exactly what I do. So, when I'm working, I kind of turn on, I use, my resources. And when I'm done, I get up and that's it. I'm just like I am now. I just am, a regular person like everybody else. I cannot walk around being open all the time. I don't have any interest in doing that. And now I know some psychics are open and some mediums are open all the time. I really don't know how they're able to do that and maintain any kind of life. That's not what I want to do, and it's not what interests me. And I'm able to turn it on and turn it off, just like you turn on and off your TV.
Of course.
So that's how I do it.
Okay. Very, very interesting. I just wanted to establish that so that we understand when we get in, because I want to get into the life after near-death subjects, but just to get that basis of your gift as well, because let's go straight into that now in the sense of this gift that you're able to give to people that have had a near-death experience. Now, I don't know, I've never come across, maybe you have in your years, but I've never come across someone who gives readings to people that have near-death experiences for the answers for some of those experiences that they've gone through, which I find fascinating. So I'm guessing that some of the information that they get you get through for NDEs must be like mind-blowing to you sometimes as well.
Right. So you're right. There aren't other people who give readings for NDEs, and the reason is, I think, because when I started when I formulated how I wanted to write the book, I decided I would do traditional research, conventional research. I would interview the people, and I would give them questionnaires, which is what you do in conventional research. But I decided I would also do readings on them because, number one, these experiences take place in another realm that's not readily accessible by material science. And, the scientists give the case studies, they give the people questionnaires. And the problem is a lot of these questions can't be answered on a questionnaire. Who are the beings of light that you met? They don't know. They can't answer it on a questionnaire. Where did they go? They don't know where they went. So these people had questions themselves about what happened to them. And they didn't know the answers. I didn't know the answers. So I decided, well, I come from a conventional research background. I can do that, but I'm also a psychic and a medium. Let's see if I do readings on them, if we can dig up some other information, because I can go where they went, in these readings. And so they were all enthusiastic about that because, as I said, they had questions themselves. So, I did readings on them. I'm not aware of other people who do this, but, why wouldn't you? If you're a psychic and a medium, why wouldn't you use your abilities for something more than, finding out about somebody's girlfriend or boyfriend? This is the way I look at it. Not that that's, not that that's not legitimate and all, but, this was like a bigger issue. And I thought, I have these abilities, so let me just see if I can use them. So that's what we did. And originally I thought that I would delve into these buckets of after effects, the cognitive and physiologic after effects, and that was going to be what this research was primarily about. But what happened was when I began to do the readings, I was very quickly taken into the whole field of consciousness, and I was taken. I went where these people went when they had their NDEs, and I found that I was much in the same position they were. That it was ineffable. I couldn't describe it. But I was taken into this other realm of consciousness. It was a primer in some ways of, consciousness. I mean, consciousness is still the last frontier that we don't really understand very well. But it did make me believe that consciousness is not in the brain, and it's not in the heart, and it's not lodged in any physical, part of our body, that it exists elsewhere as a complete and total realm. But exists also side by side within us and within all living beings. So, I had this experience of traveling with them, in effect, in their NDEs. We recorded all the readings. Now, I told everyone that they could ask questions in the readings, and they were all interested in asking their own questions. And they all had two questions that were the same. One was, why me? And the other one was, what's my mission? They all came back from their experiences feeling like they had either been given a mission and they knew what it was, or they were given a mission and they didn't know what it was. They couldn't remember what it was. So, they were all interested in that. And they all felt like they had missions, which led to the issue of, what are these NDEs all about? Because they're more than the elements. Science and television, the media, movies have made the NDEs about the light and the tunnel and the life reviews, because it's dramatic, they're dramatic images. But that's not what the NDEs are about. They're about more than the elements, because some people have very rich experiences and only have one element or no elements. So, what came out of it was many of them, as I said, believe that they have a mission. And it appears as if these NDEs are orchestrated by the universe, not by us. It's not something we can give ourselves. Orchestrated by the universe for the purpose of coming back to Earth with a mission to act as a battery of light, to light the Earth. And many of these people have missions that are able to be translated on Earth, like music or art or healing. And that's something that can help a lot of people and can bring light to the Earth. But others don't know what their missions are, or don't have missions that are translated to Earth. And many people who have NDEs actually fall by the wayside. They don't they come back and they kind of stumble around and don't know what they're supposed to do and can't acclimate because now they have one foot in the universe and one foot on Earth. And that's a very difficult path to negotiate. So it's complex. Again, the NDEs are not, though, just about the elements. They're about taking, and again, we found many of these people, there were certain themes that came up in the readings too. One theme was that there's a certain type of person who's predisposed to having an NDE. Many of these people come from backgrounds of abuse. Many of them come from darkness, I would say. They've walked a path of darkness in their lives, and they're ripe for enlightenment. And it seems as if at an exquisite moment, the universe takes them and converts them so that they can become emissaries on behalf of the universe.
Do you think that's the only way to wake them up? Do you think it's the only way they would have woken up because they maybe had lives upon lives upon lives of being stuck in their own karma in a sense?
I don't know, Kevin, because really it wasn't part of the research, so I don't know if there's if there are other ways. But I can tell you that this appeared to be definitely a way to wake them up. They come back fundamentally changed with universal qualities. They all seem to have these universal qualities of enhanced spirituality and whatnot, and sense of mission. And it seems to be imbued by the universe. I don't know if there are other ways, but I do know that the effects of NDEs, the after effects, are permanent. Whereas I've talked to people, let's say, I talked to many people who wanted to be in the study, and they had done hallucinogens. And they said, I had this experience and I did hallucinogens. And I would say to them, well, so what happened after you took the hallucinogens? Oh, I had this, and that. And then but then it didn't last. So I took the hallucinogens again, and then this happened. And then I took the hallucinogens again, and this happened. So it wasn't permanent. Whereas the after effects from NDEs, the transformation is permanent. I don't know of any other experience that will give you permanent transformation. There's lots of things you can do: chanting, meditation, lots. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here in the US, there are people marketing courses saying, how to give yourself an NDE, or, how to change your vibration or whatnot. And the methodologies they're using are not going to result in anything permanent. They could temporarily shift things, but they're not permanent. The only one I know of that's permanent is the NDE.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you're giving people the readings for those that have had a near-death experience, as you kind of said previously, it's so difficult, but it's impossible to reference, just as it's impossible for those who have had the NDE to reference where they have been or what they've the presence they've been around. It's almost like there's, and I say this on other shows, it's almost like there's a framework that has never been written about, that is undescribable, that is not even in our nature of understanding, yet it's probably there, wherever there is. And there is something greater than what any book speaks about. Would you say?
Oh, definitely. It's, William James, the famous Harvard physician and academic, said in 1904 that in terms of these noetic experiences, that you can't bring them on yourself, no matter what anybody says, you can't. And they're ineffable. You can't describe them. And you can't describe them because we don't have the language. It's a realm that we don't understand, that we don't know. We're familiar with this realm, the 3D realm, what we can see and hear and feel and touch through our senses. But this other realm it's not a physical realm, and our physical senses are not what's operative necessarily in that realm. It's our consciousness that is the modus operandi. So, and that's something that we on Earth, our consciousness, that's something that we're just not as familiar with as, what our senses produce. So, but in this other realm, the realm of the NDE, it's pure and total consciousness. And, it's why I believe that many of the experiencers said, one of their questions was, why was the reality of, where I went for my NDE more real than this reality? And the answer appeared to be that when your consciousness is free of your physical body and you're able to experience pure and total universal consciousness, that clarity and that perception is so pure that creates an ultra, an experience of a reality that's just magnified. Whereas the reality that we experience here on Earth is very much weighted down by our physical body. Everyone has consciousness. Some people have more consciousness than others. Some people don't appear to have much consciousness at all. But here on Earth, most people have just a little bit of consciousness, but a lot of physicality. But when you have an NDE, it's all consciousness. There's no physical body involved. So that's what creates this very unusual and rich and deep experience, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, science would say that consciousness is within the organs, maybe within the mind. But for me, see, how do you express consciousness and our understanding of it? For me, it's almost like when I look in the mirror, it's the awareness of being aware of my reflection. It's beyond my mind. It almost feels like that I'm on to be aware of my reflection. It's not that awareness to me, as when I consider these subjects, is outside of me. But that's just my take on it. Other people will never even look at that. Do you know what I mean? But if between us and the audience, I think how are we aware that we're aware? Now, is the aware of I'm aware? Did that come from pre-birth? Is that part of our mind? I don't believe it is. I believe it's something greater than our mind, and we've always been this greater than our mind part, which we call consciousness, just as a word. And that consciousness has grown as it grows as we progress in life, and it just goes back to where we came from. But I don't think science is going to find it within the body. Do you?
I do not believe that. As I began to explore this idea of consciousness, that I was kind of thrown into, I read lots of books, and I went to meetings, and I went to conferences, and I found that a lot of the conferences that are run by the scientific world, that it was just speaker after speaker standing up and saying, consciousness is in the brain. Consciousness is in the brain. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, this makes sense because, what do these guys study? They study neurology. They study chemistry. They study anatomy. They study physiology. They study biology. Of course they think, it's in the brain. I mean, they're not Ravi Shankar, they're not, Gandhi. I mean, they're not sitting around. They have a certain scientific and academic background that they are trained in, and that's embedded in them. And so that's what they believe. And, you're not going to take somebody who's been trained in all that and invested, and monetarily vested, because many of them have many, many, many years of training, medical schools and postgraduate degrees.
Yeah.
So that's what they've been trained. So that's what they know, and that's what they believe. But it doesn't make any sense to me that consciousness can be in the brain, because there are people who've had NDEs who have been declared clinically dead, and not all of them, but some, and they're having these very richly textured experiences when their brain is supposed to be dead. So that doesn't make sense. And the idea of veridical experiences, I don't know if you know what those are, but veridical experiences are experiences that happen that are true, but of which you have no way of explaining how you would know this. So I'll give you an example. In my book, there's a case about a physician, Raj Parti, who had an NDE and had spontaneous healing from his stage 4 prostate cancer. He was also addicted to pain medicine and was on antidepressants. And within a few days of his NDE, he was cured of his cancer, off his pain meds, no longer addicted to them, and cured of depression. But anyway, he had his NDE when he was being operated on at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was on the operating table, and during his operation, he had his NDE, and he saw his mother and his sister in India drinking tea. His mother dressed in a red sari and his sister in a green shirt and blue jeans. And he talked to them a few days after this happened, and he told them that he had seen this, and they confirmed that, in fact, at the time he was on the operating table, they were drinking tea, and that's what they were wearing. Now, how do you explain that? If consciousness is in your brain, how is he able to see that? This is a remote location. He's physically in Los Angeles, and he sees something in India. Well, the answer to that is, if you think of consciousness as being a camera out in the universe, and it can look down and see see everything simultaneously, the past, the present, and the future. And it has no geographic location. But in an NDE, your consciousness is flung out of your body. It's out in the universe, or it's out in this other realm that we can't describe, and it's able to see everything. That's called a veridical experience, and that does not appear to be at all attached to your brain. This is something completely different. And there are many veridical experiences. And in fact, as a psychic and a medium, how am I able to know things about the past, the present, and the future about people? Well, my consciousness is able to go out there and, like this camera, and see things. I'm able to access that. And in fact, anybody can do it. People think that it's some, unusual ability because in our culture, being a psychic seems like some sort of mystery. It's not really that big of a mystery. It's just that I'm working with energy, and the energy is invisible, so people can't see what's happening. But, I'm just like a transistor radio. I have antenna, and I'm able to use that antenna to pick up information.
Yeah.
Anybody can do it. You can be trained to do it. You have the Arthur Findlay Institute in the UK that trains people with absolutely no backgrounds in this to do this. I know because I went to Arthur Findlay, and there were people in my class. There were people in my class who came with partners. They were kind of dragged along, and they didn't believe in this, and they didn't even want to be there. But they were there because their partners had dragged them along for the week. And by the end of the week, these people were also doing readings. Because you can be trained to do it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if our nature is consciousness, that's what we are. Then we're just remembering that part of us.
Yes.
And obviously, as any good skill, homing in on it and practicing it. And
exactly, it's practice. It's just like if I told you to sit down at the piano and you didn't play the piano, and I said sit down and play a concerto, you wouldn't be able to do it. But if you practiced and studied and worked on it, you'd be able to do it. And it's the same thing with this.
Okay, well, very briefly as well, obviously you've come across this as well, in the sense that, if a Christian-based person is going to have an NDE, then they are going to most times probably see Jesus. If someone in Islamic faith is going to have a near-death experience, most times never talk about it or discuss it, then mostly it will be with Muhammad, maybe, or something similar. And if an atheist is going to have a near-death experience, yeah, I've interviewed people where some of them have seen Jesus, that's true, but that's because that's what they've maybe heard before is something that would be in their background in school or something. My point of the question is, I suppose, do you feel that after all the people you've interviewed, that we make our truth up as we have an NDE, that the nature of the reality of where we go to is not as it is here? It's almost like we create the reality when we move on. So our truth is our truth until we change it or remember some other aspect of ourselves where we see a greater part of our truth.
Right. Well, it's a complex question, Kevin. It's a good question. It's complicated. I believe that intention and manifestation play a very, very large part in our lives. We create our own reality, and it does play a part in NDEs as well. Most of these people seem to be, some of them outright ask for their NDEs, and some of them seem to be almost in training for their NDEs, so that their lifestyle changed. Years before their NDE, they were maybe becoming vegetarian or practicing yoga or becoming more spiritual. In terms of intention, what you see in your NDE, they do appear to be very customized experiences. So if you expect to see Buddha, you're going to see Buddha. For, somebody who's born again, if they expect to see Jesus, they tend to see Jesus. If you think you're going to see your grandma, you might see your grandma. So they are very much customized. I think each person gets what they need to get to come back transformed. Excuse me. So, many people said to me, this was very interesting, actually. They said, I didn't go through a tunnel. Was my experience valid? Or I didn't see a light. Was my experience valid? They have been the idea of the tunnel and the light and certain things that you should experience in your ND has been so stamped onto what people think of when they think of NDEs, that people feel like their NDE maybe wasn't valid if they don't have all the elements of the NDE. So we found that everybody gets what they need to get. Not everybody has to go through a tunnel or see a light or have a life review, but they all get what they need to get to come back transformed. The reality of their, what happens in their consciousness, I don't know the answer to that, because these experiences that they have in their NDEs, seem to occur in the universe. They're taken out into the universe. They're told many truths about the universe. They're given answers to universal questions about philosophy and science and astronomy and math and all sorts of things. I think they're shown and told things that they have no knowledge about here on Earth. It's just not part of their realm or their scope here on Earth. It goes way beyond that. But I do believe that intention and manifestation are really big, important subjects that need to be studied more, for their impact on how we live and, how we view everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've just, come across information that I've brought through myself that, we create, we when we cross over, we'll, as a soul, a consciousness, we're still searching for truth. There is no defining truth on the levels that we go to, no defining truth, and there is actually infinite levels to go to with infinite new truths. There's no one set to say, this is how it is, there you go, there's the book, that's it, okay. It's almost like there's realities like this where we keep going to redefine our truth and to on some sort of quest, some sort of journey, it seems to be, to know ourselves or to know love, maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's so very important. I always try to bring it back to this. It's so very important, though, to be here in the moment now. I think this is the great thing about your book, is that it reminds us just how important the moment now is. We don't need to be so excited and and wanting to leave our bodies now and go back to the next journey. We're here for a very important reason. We must have been so desperate as consciousness to want to come down here. So we shouldn't forget that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Okay. I know. What are we on now? 51 minutes. My God, this has gone so quick. Is there anything that you'd really like to speak about in terms of your work or one particular aspect, seeing as we're at the top of the hour?
Yeah. Well, I would say, one of the takeaways from the book, Life After Near Death, is the idea that, we are eternal, that our essence, the battery that runs us, our consciousness, our soul, whatever you want to call it, continues to exist and to live beyond our physical body. Our physical body is what houses us here on Earth, but our essence, that is us, continues to to live. So I think that's important to take away. In terms of my work as a medium and as a psychic, I do readings for people all over the world on Skype, just like we're talking here, because energy is non-local. So we can sit across the table from each other on Skype, no matter where you are in the world. And, I've read for many people in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. So I do that. And, the people, your listeners are more than welcome to visit my website. I have two websites, DeborahDiamondAuthor.com and DeborahDiamondPsychic.com. So they can subscribe to my newsletter. They can go to our Facebook page, Life After Near Death, and like that page and stay up on events and inspirational messages. So this has been great. I thank you very much for having me on as your guest.
We've barely scratched the surface. I barely feel like I've given your book any justice. It's such an immense subject. It's a lifetime's worth of talk. Now, just for the book as well, just because I feel like I just want to plug this as well, that actually there's some fantastic stories in the book covering all sorts of different subjects, ones that, truly stuck out to you in your research as well. So, I would highly recommend this book as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Life After Near Death, Miraculous Stories of Healing and Transformation in the Extraordinary Lives of People with Newfound Powers. And I hope your listeners will buy it and enjoy it. And if they do enjoy it, please leave a review online. On Amazon, that would be great. I'd appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we've been putting the book on the screen all the way along as well, along with your website. We might just alternate between the two websites, actually. Okay. But just one final question as well. How has this work changed you as a person?
That's one question. That could be, that would be another show. Well, I live my life very differently than I did when I was in the investment business. I was in the investment business. I was a commentator on CNBC. I was on the fast track. I jetted to Europe for meetings in the city and in Zurich and in Geneva. I lived a very different kind of life. Of course, I worked on Wall Street, and Wall Street is really just about money. It's a dollars and cents business. That's all it's about. There's no other meaning to it. That's all it is. And I find that now, I'm doing things to help people, and it's a lot more meaningful. It's a lot richer. It's more satisfying. Lots of those aspects of my previous life have dropped away. I'm not like jetting over to Europe for, a 2-hour meeting. I don't drive around in limousines anymore. I just don't live that way anymore. So, and that's fine. That's fine. So my life has changed very much.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to get your take on that as well. Well, look, Deborah Diamond, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.